Good afternoon. I'm Adam Lauder, and I lead TD's business banking team here on Vancouver Island. We're very happy to once again be part of this year's Economic Summit as we collectively learn about and understand the state of the island's economy. We're delighted to sponsor this afternoon's Technology Showcase session, where we will hear from some great island-based companies who are doing amazing things with technology. As for our team at TD Business Banking, we have a number of team members who are available to connect, so please feel free to reach out to us through the virtual attendee hub. We hope you enjoy this session and have a great afternoon.
My name is George Hansen, and as president of the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 15th Annual Economic Summit and to the 6th Annual Technology and Innovation Showcase. This bonus session has once again been assembled by the good folks at Innovation Island, and it promises to feature several fascinating and informative entrepreneurial stories. A big thank you to Graham Truax for identifying the participating companies and their stories, and for moderating this showcase. And thank you to TD Bank for sponsoring this year's Technology and Innovation Showcase.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our Tech Showcase and the VIA Summit. Once again, running 100% virtual. Can totally empathize with how difficult that is to manage in these still somewhat crazy times. I first want to thank the sponsor for this session, TD Bank, and all of the additional organizers and planners that have put in countless hours to make this event happen. So what we're going to do today is to try to keep this really tight. We have 4 really interesting companies that are going to be presenting, and I'm going to do just a little intro on each individual, and we're going to cover just a few basic questions, and then I'll ask everyone to just share their screen and then walk through the presentations that they've put together. So with that said, we're gonna start off with Clive Goodinson. Clive is what I call a full stack entrepreneur. He's built everything from the ground up. He's put together a really awesome team, and he's created a very inspiring platform that is helping students and learners to use digital interfaces quite dynamically. So Clive, just kind of opening up here, what really inspired you to develop your product?
Well, I think, growing up, I read comics. So I was a big fan of comics, not superhero comics, but like adventure comics, like Tintin, and comic strips like The Far Side. And I found myself, years later living in Vancouver. I was working as a freelance web developer, and I was implementing other people's creative designs. I was working with some high-end designers, but I always had my own creative aspirations. And so I married those two things one day. I was actually looking at Wikipedia, and I was thinking about how Wikipedia is this wonderful repository for information, sort of this collaborative body of work, but it's really fact-based. I thought, what would a Wikipedia for stories look like? And so that kind of evolved into this notion of creating a tool for making comic strips that anyone could use. I had tried to make a comic myself as a kid, and quickly discovered how much patience and skill is required. Even just drawing the same character over and over and over again and making it look like the same character, it's deceptively difficult. So I launched a very primitive website, and in the first year, found a lot of traction in the education market with teachers, using it as a creative tool with their students. So that was a number of years ago. In 2019, we launched a complete rewrite and complete reinvention of the tool to make it as easy as possible. So I almost think of it as two companies. The first one funded the second one. And yeah, it's just really taken off. It's essentially a writing tool for kids, visually oriented. What kid doesn't love comics? So, assigning a comic to students isn't going to elicit a bunch of groans. It's inherently engaging, and students can write about anything, and anything that they're learning about, they can write about in a comic.
Cool. So how has this crisis, how has COVID-19 impacted your business, and what changes have you seen?
Yeah, I consider myself very fortunate because COVID has only benefited us. As you can imagine, because so many educators were suddenly forced to embrace distance learning, teaching remotely, there was even more demand, even more people out there on the internet searching for engaging things for their students. So, that sort of gave us a boost. Because my team works remotely anyway. Of course, we've all had our struggles with the pandemic, but as a business, we were just able to keep going as usual, really. And I guess every cloud has a silver lining. We just embraced the attention we got.
Fantastic, and that's certainly true. I mean, different companies have experienced radically different market conditions, and so for parents trying to keep their kids engaged, and teachers being challenged with remote learning and stuff, that's been definitely true. So tell you what, let's just have you share your screen, and we can dive in and learn a little bit more about the product and the platform that you've built.
Sure. Sure, okay. Well, what I'm going to do, Graham, is I'll just show screenshots from our product, and I think that'll give me an opportunity to tell you like what it is, but also why it matters, why people want to use it, why educators care about it. So when a teacher is using Pixton, they sort of have a dashboard. They can organize their students into classrooms, and then within each classroom, each student can create their avatar. So the student's kind of creative journey, if you will, starts with avatar creation. And here it's very important to us, and just very important to everybody who uses the product, of course, to be able to depict, we want kids to be able to depict themselves accurately, and ultimately seeing themselves reflected in these comics that they're creating and their classmates just makes the whole experience more engaging and authentic and relatable to their lives, right? We're helping kids see connections between themselves and the thing that they're learning about. And if we can achieve that, ultimately kids are going to remember more, understand more, learn more at the end of the day. So in addition to creating avatars, kids also make comics, and I'll delve into the comic maker in a second. So like I said, with the avatar maker, there's all kinds of different, I think we're all familiar with avatar makers. So, we're just doing our best to have conversations with our users, and, we're adding new content all the time. Just trying to provide that opportunity for representation. We even have wheelchairs and hearing aids, for instance. So it's basically got everything. Once all the kids in the class, and in this case, the teacher and the co-teacher create their avatars, they get something called a class photo. So this is a fun way to represent, a group of kids. And it was a great substitute for real photos during the pandemic, because of course a lot of groups couldn't get together, and then you can apply different themes to these photos, so it's sort of a fun element, sort of an icebreaker activity. We've got lots of different themes like fall and superheroes, stuff like that. Now you're looking at the comic maker itself, and this is where most of the activity takes place. And I think we've successfully created something that's simultaneously very easy to use, right? Most kids need no instruction in figuring out how to use this. But at the same time, it's very powerful. There's a lot that any student can do with it across the spectrum of skill levels. So for instance, we've got thousands of backgrounds. You can search by keyword. I just sort of randomly picked Egypt. We've got, again, hundreds or thousands of characters around different themes. And not just sort of pre-made characters, but of course, like I mentioned, you see yourself and all of your classmates, or in this case, I'm a teacher and I see all the kids in my different classes. And so I can insert myself or my classmates into my comic. We've also got loads and loads of outfits, so I can sort of dress myself up. So in this case, imagine a child might think, well, what does Egypt have to do with me? Why should I care? What does it matter? But if they can put themselves, imagine themselves living in that age and that place, it just helps them make those connections with their life. We've got what we call focuses, where you can sort of zoom in and out of the scene. Words, of course, are a hugely important part of making a comic. Something that's somewhat unique about comics is it really forces you to be concise. And because you're creating a series of these images or panels, you're forced to take whatever it is you're trying to communicate. So you might be trying to explain something or summarize something. You have to really think about how you're going to, first of all, organize that in a sequence of images and speech bubbles, for example. And then also what words you're going to actually put in there, and you're forced to be concise.
Cool.
We've got facial expressions, and so just taking this feature alone, the huge variety of facial expressions we have can be very useful in applications like with social emotional learning or special ed, working with kids with autism, helping them, practice and practice recognizing facial expressions in sort of very non-threatening environment. It's an extremely versatile tool. It's useful and usable across a vast spectrum of skill levels and also subject areas.
Fantastic, Clive. The depth, and I've known this over the years, the depth of creative that you've assembled here is really amazing. And just thinking back on assignments, to have this tool and to create, these situations and to personalize them is really remarkable. So thank you so much for that. Just a note for everyone. We're going to go through everybody here, and then we'll have time for audience Q&A at the end. And what I forgot to say at the front end was Pixton Comics. So Clive from Pixton Comics. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so next up we have Michael Garfinkle. Michael has developed something called docLogica. And Mike is a practicing MD and clinical instructor at UBC. And when I first met Mike, he said that he had some extra time on his hands and he thought he'd do something with it and build an app that he's calling docLogica. So this, in my opinion, I think someday, maybe soon, is going to help doctors around the world. And so Mike, aside to just having a little extra time on your hands, what really inspired you to do this?
I remember being a resident, and I was examining this patient in the emergency room, and I think the staff said, "Hey, look at their neck. If you can't see the neck vein, that means they need fluids, and give them fluids." So I went in there, I looked at their neck. I didn't think I could see that vein. I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I need to give them fluids." So I give them fluids, and then an hour later, they had trouble breathing. We did an X-ray. There's fluid in their lungs. So obviously, giving them fluids was a bad idea. And that got me wondering, these things that we're told are good or bad. How good or bad are they? How these tests that we're using in medicine, We should know, I looked it up. It's like, actually, this sign isn't that great. But how are you supposed to remember this when it's, 2 a.m. or any a.m. really? So that really inspired me to start assembling this data. And that kind of evolved into also a database of disease symptoms, because it's even more impossible. There's thousands of diseases and you can't remember all those symptoms. You can try and then you're going to fail. So, and that's what leads to a diagnostic error. It's a really huge problem. There's about every year in the US, about 150,000 people die or are seriously harmed from diagnostic error. And the reason is we're human. We can't remember this. We just can't. We can't remember all the symptoms and all the diagnostic tests. So I've been really building this database over 7 years, but only recently have I made that database accessible at the point of care through apps. So I learned software development because I had other free time on the side, and I built iOS, Android, and web apps that allow doctors to use this database to help diagnose disease. Yeah.
Wow. Well, firstly, thanks for kind of stating the obvious that doctors are only human, right? And I think all of us can often reflect on just this vast amount of knowledge that hopefully is just assembled, just like magic, where we have all these solutions, and then on the flip side, we know that, oh, how do they do that? So you've been very open with where you're coming from on this, and so just in a super nutshell, sometimes we're talking about elevator pitches. How would you describe what you've built? And then I'm going to let you show us.
So basically, it is there's two parts. One, this database that contains diagnostic test accuracies, and second part, it's a database of disease symptoms, and that's the main building of it. And this can be used in a variety of ways. I'm a doctor, so I use that database to help me and help others diagnose at the bedside, but this is this data can be used for a variety of purposes. And I have a few relationships that I'm building with other healthcare companies using an API to use this data for their own uses. So I'm really excited to show a bit more of what this can do.
Perfect. Let's do it. Just cue up your screen and let's see.
Okay, so let me just boot up this presentation here. So it's called docLogica. And I'm going to give you a scenario of, what can often happen in medicine. So a typical doctor visit kind of goes like this. Say Melissa's a GP, she's working, and she's seeing George, one of her patients. And any patient relationship, the doctor relationship, you're going to ask some questions, you get some answers, and you have to kind of figure out what to do. So she asks George, hey, why are you here? And he says, oh, I'm not feeling so well. I've been burping a lot lately. That's kind of bothering me. And also, I've been checking my blood sugars at home, and they are getting a little bit high. So what does Melissa do? She probes her brain and says, okay, high sugars. Well, that maybe he's developed diabetes. He's a bit overweight. That's not uncommon. And this burping, probably that doesn't sound like anything, and she discards that, not really associated. So she tells George, I think you have new onset diabetes, lose some weight, watch your diet, and we'll see how it goes. And she sends him home. But what happens is George, unfortunately, is diagnosed with metastatic pancreatic cancer 6 months later. Why is that? Well, Melissa, she didn't remember, or probably never knew that those are actually two common symptoms of pancreatic cancer, belching and new onset diabetes. Oh. So this is the first break that happens. A big major source of error in diagnostic reason these days is that we can't remember all these symptoms and therefore can't form a correct differential.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt there,
Yep.
Mike. The screen isn't sharing?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. This description was fine to just kind of get us warmed up there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen now.
Yeah. And just carry on from where you were there.
Okay.
That made general sense. So.
Okay. So yeah, that's Melissa. That's her
Okay.
avatar. George going home, but developing pancreatic cancer 6 months later.
Yikes.
And that's the first major source of error. But let's say Melissa knew that George knew that these two symptoms could be associated with pancreatic cancer. So she probes her brain, gets one of the possibilities, and tells George, you know, this could be pancreatic cancer. Let's order a test and, you know, see if you have it. So she orders a serum marker that she thinks is pretty good, CA 19.9. Gets a negative result back and sends George home and saying, you know what, test negative, you probably don't have cancer, don't worry about it. But unfortunately, the same thing happens because Melissa didn't quite realize that, you know, that test isn't that great. A negative cancer marker for pancreatic cancer doesn't entirely rule out that possibility. So that's the second major problem in modern diagnostic reasoning, is that doctors can't possibly remember all the accuracies of all the tests, because it's not black and white. It's shades of gray how good these things are. So, and again, as I was saying before, this is a major problem because it leads to death and harm worldwide. Millions and millions of people are suffering because of this. But it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe it had to be that way 100 years ago when we didn't have, you know, electronics and software. But you know, I think we have the tools today to do something about it. And the solution is obviously an electronic database where you store this data, and it helps doctors access this wealth of information to help with decision making at the bedside. So I've tried to do this, and currently that database is 1,800 diseases, almost 1,300 test accuracies, and I formed this by going through the primary literature myself, and it has over about 3,000 references to the primary literature. So what I'm going to do now, that I can show you my screen, is show you a little bit of the web app in option. So it's available on your phone or as a web app. So we'll go to the differential diagnostic maker. So George, let's say he's male. He's coming with a chronic issue. He's 54, and he was having belching, and he had some new onset diabetes. So basically what happened here when I said create differential, you have that database of diseases, and you find the subset of the diseases that match those two symptoms. And the database also, I didn't mention, it has incidence data. So it's able to arrange that by incidence. So it kind of gives you a probability spectrum. And because George is old and male, cancer floats to the top. And we can see here that that cancer is pancreatic cancer. So Melissa clicks on this. She sees, oh, belching, diabetes, that's very common. And in pancreatic cancer, maybe George has this. She can see some incidence data here. You can see cancer rises with age, and she can look at some tests she can use. So, you know, that test, that serum marker, she said, C19.9. So there's some data here on probabilities. And from this study, we know that people presenting with common symptoms of pancreatic cancer have about an 8% probability of actually having cancer. And she can see here that her negative test took that 8% to a 3%. And 3%, I wouldn't really want to go home with a 3% chance of having cancer. I don't think anybody really would. So she would see that and then hopefully order additional testing before giving George reassurance. And that, obviously my app has a lot of other stuff, but I think that's kind of the power of it in a nutshell.
Wow. I think this is something that maybe a lot of people thought existed at this level due to our capabilities today, and you know, in this environment. But knowing that it doesn't, as being developed, is awesome. And then I'm just going to give a little shout out here. So startups inventing things, developing things, launching. You know, there's a lot of work getting to revenue, and you actually now have paying customers for this application from your peer group, and so you've really broken through with not only the concept and the development but the engagement, and so very excited to see how this progresses. So thank you so much for that. Just kill your screen share there, and we can keep this going here. So thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next we have Josi Billinghurst. Josi is an aviator, and like many startup entrepreneurs, he's built something to solve problems and difficulties that he's had, as an operator, and lots of entrepreneurs are solving their own problems, and if those problems extend, then you might have a really interesting business. So Josi, just kind of aside to that, were there other things that got you inspired to build what you're building here and develop in that direction?
Yeah, essentially aviation, as you can imagine, the logistics of it it's very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. It's wrought with redundancies, very, very, very paperwork heavy. It's pretty much Flintstones era technology, what we're using for the average operator all the way up to WestJet. So it's not effective in my opinion. You can imagine that the only way for most pilots to know that the airplane's not fit for flight or not serviceable is you need a person to physically go down there and tell them that it's not. There's no cues or anything else to let them know, hey, you got this going on, or you don't have enough time on your engine to do the day's flight, so on and so forth. So being a manager of these logistics system for a small air operator, it just seemed crazy. And it's what computers were built to do. They were designed for this kind of stuff, right? So to take the redundancies away, to store your documents, so on and so forth. So within that, to try and make my life easier and try to make the air operation more effective, I searched desperately for a system that would help me with this, and there's nothing. There's nothing that would do it. So we went ahead and built something.
Okay, so here's another example where probably lots of us didn't really want to know that.
Right.
We make the assumption, oh, it's all just perfectly managed, et cetera, et cetera. But again, you're doing something here that's going to move the dial. So now for you, because I think we could all associate, how's COVID impacted your business?
Well, for the aviation industry, I think it's been frozen in time the past 2 years. So obviously, we haven't had a lot of growth at this point in time, but we're seeing a lot of movement now, especially with smaller operators. They're gearing up for tourism, stuff like that. So that's good. One thing the pandemic has done is it's changed our working life forever. There's opportunities for people to work at home more. That's kind of become the status quo. Staff shortages are huge right now, especially in the aviation industry. So as we get out of the pandemic, I think there will be a big need for Propeller One, where people can run their logistics system from home with less staff, with less paperwork, and using up less real estate to store all this stuff.
Right. Okay. So Propeller One, let's have you queue up your screen share and walk us through what you've built here.
Sounds good. Are you seeing that okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so you see my presentation here, logistics solutions built by aviation people for aviation people. So what we're looking at here, it's a generic journey log page, as we call it. So this is what the air crew use to, you see at the top there, to log all their trips. So if they go from, let's say, Campbell River to Vancouver, that has to get logged along with the associated times. You'll see toward the bottom, there's been a maintenance action. A bunch of work has been done, so that also has to get signed out. This piece of paper here ends up becoming a legal record and locked in time with all these figures. So what happens from here is all the digital, the displayed figures and entries from the journey log, they all have to get transcribed to a vast number of other areas of the system. And an example of that is we have all these record books here. So you have record upon record upon record of where all this information has to get redundantly transcribed to. Yeah, it's quite frustrating as for people like me anyway. So now you have your aircraft, and of course we have maintenance schedules in place to make sure that stuff doesn't run on the airplane forever. You don't want to have 10 million thousand hours on your engine. So you can have up to 100, 150 tasks on your airplane that are all scheduled. They all have to get done at certain times. So all those figures from the journey log, they have to be updated into stuff called maintenance tracking systems or monitoring systems. And it's generally just a whiteboard with all your tasks laid out. Moving on from there, we decided that we're going to do work orders and then eventually store our records. So as you can see here off to the right, we have the average maintenance office record storage area there, and it's indicative of a bit of a dumpster fire there. So that's the systems as they run now. So here's a little saying I brought up here. So aviation itself is not inherently dangerous, but to an even greater degree than the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of any carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. With a paper-generated system, it's nobody wants to be neglectful in this industry, but it's certainly easy to become complacent and miss something. Within a paper-generated system, how are critical logistical or safety information to be effectively relayed? It doesn't seem it could be done to me. So I've done a lot of studies in safety management, specifically with aviation, and the one big saying with that is a theory behind it is that if you're not profitable, you're not safe, and it seems like a poor term, but it's very true. How much profits are lost due to overburdened administrative systems and overburdened employees? It cuts the bottom line essentially. These profits they're generally used to maintain aircraft and keep all the animals happy, as you can see. Working for some other larger air operators, they have a virtual army, huge offices that just sit here and they're just running these systems and transferring records and making sure everything's up to date. Another example I kind of attribute to the old way of running record systems is imagine doing banking in the 1980s where you got your paycheck and then you go to the bank teller, you draw out a bit of cash, you deposit some in the bank, you go home, you check all your bills, you write checks for your bills, you put them in the mail, you put a stamp on them, bills paid, hopefully. This is a good outline of how the average aviation logistics systems run these days. So what we've done with Propeller 1, moving on, is we've digitized everything. Everything is given broken down into three main components for the log, the maintenance control aspect, down to doing the maintenance. The cells are they're all linked and they talk to each other. So that's obviously something that's indicative to make sure the system communicates. At the end of the day, the biggest problem that we have is obviously what do we do with all these documents and these records and everything else. So it's all digitally stored, has automatic correction management because they are all legal records. So if you go and alter anything, it's done automatically throughout the system. So at the end of the day, Propeller 1, as far as I'm concerned, it's a safety and financial best practice. It streamlines everything. It's a good communication tool, moving along here to the final part of my presentation, general aviation logistics systems as of today, they're technologically equivalent to the original version of Oregon Trail. It's a fun game, but it's just simply out of date.
Okay, again, great representation of taking, what was a burden, a analog system of a whole bunch of things. You just stop your screen share there.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, thanks. Taking that mass amount of data and working with it and maturing it, and obviously creating an application that has clear and present value for your business and other businesses over the course of time. So great work, and I think as this develops and as the flying public gets back to normal again, hopefully your business really starts to take off. Forgive the pun. Okay, so thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have Alex Duane. Alex is from a company that I think a lot of people might know the brand of in this region, Tickit, ticketing software for events that for the most part we've been shut out of, and the fun factor has kind of been reduced here quite a bit. Alex is a talented developer who just has really streamlined, again, a fairly fixed process back in the day with tickets for events and concerts and things like that. And this platform has had a really wide and diverse set of engagements with different industries that Alex is going to talk about. So Alex, again, respectfully, when we would think about somebody in the ticketing business and we think about COVID, oh my goodness, like that must have been horrendous. So how have you managed, and how has this crisis presented itself for you and your team?
Yeah, there's not really much way to say it. It was pretty jarring. I can remember it was the Friday the 13th was the day Bonnie Henry banned events over 250 people. And I think later in that weekend, it was down to 50 people. So lots of people had impacts. Ours were just really immediate and sort of knew them at once. And it was a really busy time, weirdly. You think everything shutting down would make it not that busy. But it turned out it was crazy. Everyone wanted to know what's happening with my money. Like, how do we stay afloat during this time? A lot of the ticket holders for some of the events, the younger events, were pretty worried too. They had spent their $300 on whatever festival they were going to that year. And now they're worried if they can't make rent. And so there was this really sort of delicate process of refunding, but not refunding too much, just kind of getting the right amount. We learned it's easy to take money, relatively speaking, but really hard to give it back in an accurate way that doesn't give away too much because you can't get it back. Yeah, so it was in the beginning, it was a bit of a doozy. We did find some silver linings. I'm going to give a shout out right now to haunted houses, pumpkin patches, flower festivals, drive-in movies, all these things that were pretty small sectors before. And I think they surprised themselves. When there's not a lot of competition for the event dollar out there, taking your family out to a pumpkin patch seemed really exciting. And for the most part, was pretty COVID safe. So we have been able to develop a few new sectors to keep things going and outlast some competition, which is pretty great. But we're also pretty excited for things the way they look like they're going right now.
Yeah, getting back to normal. So yeah, again, totally empathize with that, and some of those smaller events were all that folks had. And so with that said, what before this all happened, before you committed, what got you into this space? What was your motivation for starting this?
Hubris, ego.
Okay, I think you need to be more honest.
Yeah, exactly. We had a little design studio, and some of our clients wanted to sell tickets on the internet. And the options out back then weren't very good. They were complicated. They were expensive. Ticketing companies have a pretty rough reputation out there for gouging everybody and being technologically laggards. And we figured, well, how hard could that be? We could probably do that. And we could keep all those fat ticketing fees for ourselves. So I mean, that's the really honest answer, was a little bit of hubris. And I often wonder if I'd known exactly what went into it, what I would have, like, old self would say to future self and vice versa. But I'm glad we didn't know. It's been an adventure in building things. Yeah, and at its core, it is a simple concept. The devil's in the details, as always.
Obviously. Well, thanks for that openness. And again, for people that are taking these entrepreneurial steps and journeys here, it can be inspired by all sorts of things. And so thanks for that. So tell you what, let's have you queue up your screen share and walk us through Tickit.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, are you seeing what I'm showing?
Looking good.
All right. So we're just going to do a little product tour basically. And I thought I'd start with a little bit of background, a little bit of the evolution before we jump into what the actual product today looks like. So this was that hubris phase, the MVP, the how hard could it be? And what we literally did was we wired up PayPal, like the PayPal that you've seen in the past, where it redirects you to their site, to a PDF generator that we built for, I think, one of our restaurant clients to make their menus. And right before the event, we got a little worried. We're like, this doesn't seem secure. And so we grabbed a barcode off Google Images and we stuck that on all the tickets. And we made a little bit of money. And it was a bit of a rush, and it proved out that this concept was possible in some sort of way. But we definitely weren't there yet. And so we spent the next few years sort of looking around, seeing what events are out there, what features they might need, and started building out the pieces that we'd need to make this more of a going concern. Things like multiple time zones and currencies, and the ability to actually have real barcodes, figure out what a barcode does, refunds and payment plans and seat maps, and all these sort of details that become important when your events get a little bit more established. And so we spent the next couple of years just building that out, but we kept our day jobs until around 2016, when we were able to wind down the design studio and go into ticketing full time. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge this slide. This is my favorite slide I think I've ever put together due to this one photo. This lady just brings me joy every time.
Cool.
So full-time hiring, growing steadily, sold our millionth ticket, which is pretty exciting. And this takes us kind of to today, when we can jump into the product tour. Today's got an asterisk on it. So today is on the eve of COVID. And I'll show a COVID slide near the end, just showing kind of what that looked like. At the time of COVID, we were the vendor of choice, I would say, for independent festivals. So by independent, I'm meaning not owned by a Live Nation or an MRG. In BC and Alberta, the directors of these events are notoriously sort of hard to break into. And so we're really proud of our reputation in the sector. Ontario and Quebec growing strong, and a bunch of international sort of reputation growing. So the actual product itself has a couple components. It's kind of sprawling. The first, and this is the public facing storefronts. So each store gets a little bit of design. And we've worked hard to keep all the extra noise out of the way here. And so on this next slide, you're going to see, if our little video loop works here, what it looks like to actually buy a ticket. So you can sort of half pay attention to that. But what you'll notice along the way is there's not a lot of extra stuff. It's not asking you to sign in with Facebook or tweet your friends or forcing you to go through account setups. It's not promoting other shows either from your competition. It's a really streamlined, simple process. So I think this whole loop here is about 25 seconds. And it shows, there's not a lot in the way of buying a ticket. And a lot of our iteration has been on making this as smooth as possible. Something kind of in contrast to a lot of the competition out there. Moving on, there's a comprehensive set of management tools that promoters will see and interact with. And so these relatively clean screenshots here belie really a lot of depth and complexity. So when you set up an event, you're probably setting up multiple ticket types, and those have different prices, and they all come out at different days on automatic schedules with different quantity caps. Some have seats, some have discount codes. The street team needs their discount codes. The DJ's girlfriend's best friend needs to be on the guest list. All these sort of things are wrapped up into this interface. And so one of the things that we've been able to do over time is spend a lot of times with promoters and iterating this design over and over and over into something that's actually comprehensible and hopefully fairly intuitive for people. One other major part of the administrative tools is the reporting. And strangely, this is like a pretty big blind spot for a lot of the events industry, is how your event's actually doing. How does it compare to years before? And people would just look in their bank accounts and see if there was more money or less, which is one good metric, but it's not the only metric. And so we spent a lot of time developing comparisons to year-over-year style reports to help people track how their promotions are actually working. Do they need to buy more radio spots? Do they need to get the street team out more? What's pulling? What's not? And the final major component of the technological system is what happens at the gate, so after the sale. And we spent a lot of summers out sweating at the gates with people at music festivals. And so this is mobile apps, so iOS and Android, iPads, computers. We have closets full of barcode scanners. And gates can be a pretty intense place to be. You can have thousands of people that have been camping overnight, trying to get the best spot. It can be really hot, it can be really cold, it can be rainy. Everyone's exciting. The internet almost always sucks. And you need to have your scanners right in sync. You've got people scanning in tickets and trying to scan their way in. And so it's like a big synchronization, online, offline sort of snafu. So this bit of infrastructure is a pretty key part of what we put together. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about COVID. I thought this graph was funny, so I wanted to show it. I think that March 2020, this is a bunch of Marches in a row of our revenue. That March 2020, I think that represents about $150, something like that. So it was pretty intense. The saddest part was we had to scale down the team. That was nothing that we wanted to have to do. But due to some of our financial structure, we don't hold money. We've always let people process their own money, and we sort of enable it. We were able to find ourselves in decent financial shape without any huge liabilities, and that enabled us to outlast a bunch of our competition through this pretty rough time. So we're pleased to still be here. And like I said, those new sectors, agriculture in particular, was pretty great and pretty strong. And so now here we are. Those new sectors remain strong, and it feels different right now compared to this time last year. This time last year, people were wondering if things were coming back, but no one was setting anything up. There was like people were staying home. This year, small shows are back on sale already, and big shows, like as we speak, people are setting up their tickets for 2022 season, just kind of waiting to pull the trigger. The optimism among promoters is palpable, much stronger than it has been. One interesting challenge that we've got right now, and maybe some people at the conference have some ideas, is payment processing, processing the credit cards for festivals. Festivals used to be sort of a mid-risk sort of thing, but relatively desirable. We never had a problem finding processors. Some events are finding it challenging now because festivals seem like a scary industry, like they didn't used to before. Yeah, so that's kind of Tickit in a nutshell. There's a lot of pieces, but that's a pretty decent overview. Yeah, and I love talking about ticketing and tech and all that. And yeah, and here's a photo of what's coming back for us all. This is Caslow Jazz Fest, one of my fun clients out in Caslow. So yeah, hope to see you all at a show soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alex. And again, that slide kind of tells the story of a lot of different companies that have had this real up and down with things. And so, yeah, perfect. Yeah. So you've survived this, you're repositioning, and then some of those smaller events have kind of kicked off, to a new normal. So that brings us to most of our allocated time for the presentations. A big shout out to everyone for taking the time to do these presentations and for hanging out to do a little bit of Q&A with the audience. And thanks again to the VAIA crew for putting this all together. We wish everybody well with the rest of the conference, and we're glad to have this bonus session in front. In years past, we did this, in the auditorium, and I look back and want to get back to that too. So With that said, we'll just take a little breather here and we can shift into the Q&A momentarily. All right, so there's the familiar Zoom screen with a whole bunch of squares. Someone commented that it would be cool if we could have like Pixton avatars while we're all doing the screen share here. So Clive, you could get to work on that maybe tomorrow or something. So,
Sure thing. I'll send you the invoice, Graham.
there we go. Yeah. So Josi, Michael, Alex, Clive, again, thank you for walking us through your products and kind of the trials and tribulations of these times. I just want to say to everyone here that we're going to try to follow, kind of the classic Zoom hand up thing. If you have a real burning question, then just put your hand up on the camera and just start talking. And call the folks out by name, either by the names of the companies, Propeller One, docLogica, Tickit or Pixton, or these people's names. So I have a couple questions to get things going, but I'm just going to pause and take a look at the chat and questions that I have here. Okay, Clive, let me just kind of throw one at you here. Your product Commons can tell stories without language, but is this being used within other countries with other languages?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we do focus on Canada and the US for our own sort of efforts, but yes, it's used around the world. And it's compatible with most written languages. I just a random recollection. I remember seeing something on social media, and it was from Namibia, I think, and it was a photo of like these kids in a classroom in Namibia, and they had Pixton on their devices. I mean, that just blows my mind.
Fantastic. Well, again, universal language somewhat in being able to create these scenes. Okay, just reading some things here. So this is kind of a broad question to everyone. Why Vancouver Island? Why are you here? What's it like being here, doing what you're doing? Because the use case, the business case of a lot of the things that you're representing can go beyond that, and that's kind of part of the intention. But any of you gentlemen like to answer that one?
I'm happy to answer. Personally, I lived in Vancouver for 14 years and wanted to start a family, wanted affordable real estate, liked spending time in nature, and just found all those things over here. I was afraid to leave Vancouver because I thought my life would be over. I'd be completely out of touch with the world. And of course, that's not the case at all.
Okay, agree, totally.
I could follow up on that as well. In a similar sort of story, like we're here for quality of life. And we've been in business for, I'd say maybe about 10 years now, depending on your metric. And it's changed dramatically. In the beginning, we were concerned about being in this small town, and we'd mask it a little bit. We'd say we're Vancouver-ish, Vancouver Island. And because we wanted to seem big enough for larger events. And that's changed a lot over the past couple of years as our reputation's grown and as the concept of remote work has taken hold. It's a conversation point now, but not one that we feel any need to hide. And in fact, it's a great conversation point. We're talking to people back east and they find out we're on the island, and especially us up here in Comox Valley. A lot of people have heard of it, and it elicits pretty great responses like, oh, I've been there, I've heard of there, I want to come there. But what used to feel like a little bit of a liability and a choice we'd made for our own families and quality of life doesn't feel quite like a liability anymore. It's pretty great.
Fantastic. Michael, I'm just kind of trying to read and pay attention at the same time. How do you keep this database updated?
Great question. I'm lucky that I'm kind of focused on diagnostics and not treatment. Like treatment changes every year, you know, but human disease doesn't really change. The same diseases that are around, you know, in Egyptian times, in Pixton comics, were, you know, are the same now. So, but you know, sometimes COVID pops up, so, and that's not too hard to add. And diagnostics too, that's a little bit more evolving quickly, but CT scanning's been around for decades now. So I just say once you do it, you only have to do it kind of once.
Okay, that makes sense. So this question could go to Josi and maybe Michael and Alex as well. But do you see any applications near term or currently with blockchain capabilities in your business or more broadly related?
Maybe I'll let somebody else go ahead of me.
I could talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
So payment processors, if we're talking about like Bitcoin, like actual cryptocurrency, that was something we supported actually a couple of years ago through one of our payment processors, and they Stripe, and they stopped support for it. So we did along with them. And the reason they did was long settlement times. The amount of time it takes for someone to pay to actually get the money made it hard to do quick sales, like sales at the door, or sales like right before an event. And then the volatility, which is, I think, a thing that a lot of people see. You sell something for $10 and then you get $5 or you get $50. It changes, it swings so wildly. It's definitely something we're interested in. And like, I'm a little bit of a crypto fan, so I certainly watch it eagerly. There's some other companies that have been experimenting with blockchain for actual ticketing. And so it's the smart contracts used to validate tickets, used to enable reselling, tracing ownership in a really neat and often decentralized way. So there's some neat stuff happening out there. So it's a thing we have our eye on. For payments, I think it's pretty far off. I can't imagine spending a lot of development cycles on that right now. But in terms of actual ticket generation, proving identity and things like that, that's pretty interesting to us.
Okay, Josi, so that one slide that you showed was a little scary with all those stacks of paper. How has office culture changed, or just your HR? Like you're getting people doing different things. What's that transition like?
Well, it's been good. It's certainly a cultural shift. Not so much for us, but I can certainly see it for our clients, because it's a new way of thinking for them. And despite the rules being in place as we know them since the early 90s, a lot of them still don't really understand what the logistics and the flow is supposed to be. So I'm finding that when we introduce this system to new clients, we're actually having to retrain them on why the system looks this way, and it's actually the way it's supposed to be. For us, it's actually been great, because I'm able to allocate resources into areas of the company that help produce profits rather than just maintain the status quo.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So this is another one just from my chats here. More broadly, some of you have kind of grown. Well, Clive, you've mentioned some growth, and then Alex, you mentioned had to kind of lay some folks off. But how have HR challenges presented for you in the last year and a half, and what's it like today? Just anyone could take that one.
I'm happy to jump in again. I don't want to take all the spots here. So like I mentioned, we had to downsize in the beginning of pandemic, and our business is really technologically driven. And so losing those people was a real bummer because they were snapped up immediately. So good for them to find new gainful employment. Technology hiring is definitely a tough thing right now. The skills that we need in software engineering are pretty in demand, and have a pretty high premium. We're fortunate that we're in a fun space, and like we're in like a nice company to work for, but the competition in salaries is definitely, as we ramp back up, is something we're pretty concerned about.
For us, aviation's been on a bit of a sabbatical for the past almost 2 years. One challenge we have right now with Propeller One is we actually need staff to help be in the office with ourselves right now to help move the system forward. And as we know, it's not overly COVID friendly, especially if you have a small working area and all that. So now that the pandemic is subsiding, I'm seeing movement in that direction where we can actually physically grow in that area.
Okay, so this is another broad question. What are you individually seeing within this period of ours that's really catching your attention? It's not to your own product and interests, but are you seeing other apps or other businesses that you feel are really helping with some of the challenges we're facing, online, offline? What's catching your attention?
Quick answer, I suppose, operating in the education market, despite the fact that so much education was done remotely over the last couple of years. I mean, the education industry has to keep going. So, we've seen major acquisitions in the last year. Certainly more interest in ed tech, which is great for us. And I think some many teachers who before the pandemic weren't particularly comfortable with technology have been forced to finally learn how to use certain tools, and that's probably a great thing, and there's no going back now.
I'll go, I think obviously telehealth, but I think what I'm seeing is things take time to perfect, and we've just been thrown into needing it, but it's not perfected, and it's not doing a lot of situations justice. So it's juggling the need for telehealth and not, it's just a difficult situation because things aren't as good as they should be, but we're trying to. I'm just seeing that with a lot of products.
Let me just keep you there, Michael. This is a question to you directly. Can other people in health services use your product, or is it just for doctors?
Currently, it's just for, I would say, healthcare professionals. So doctors, doctor students, nurse practitioners, people who are diagnosing disease. Obviously, a thing that this could use is, diagnose yourself. And there's tools like this, which are a lot, exist. You can plug in symptoms, they'll give you something. They use things that are worse than mine, so they'll give you worse results. I don't feel like entering that market right now because the database obviously isn't complete. It'll probably never be complete, but that is something obviously that could be applied to.
Okay. So Alex, you mentioned more broadly that during the thick of things, you had small groups, pumpkin patch or something like describe what was happening with those things, and how did you connect with folks that needed tickets?
Yeah, our profile of customers changed dramatically, like in March 2020. So before, it was big festivals where people go get sweaty and spray droplets all over each other, and that's part of the experience. That's what you want. You want those droplets. And then things they shut down really hard and fast. So there was a couple months of absolutely nothing. But we'd had a little bit of a base with agricultural events, and some of them aren't actually that small. And so there'll be farms that say grow tulips, And they'd noticed in the past that people wanted to come and like look at the tulips, and they'd let, photographers come wander around. And then they started selling some small scale tickets to that. But when COVID hit and there was nowhere else to go on Mother's Day, for example, their ticket sales just went through the roof, and I think surprised all of us. It surprised them, it surprised us, because this was a safe event you could do. It was outside, not a lot of droplets, and it had a nice long season, and you could space your groups apart. And so it was, yeah, it's an interesting sector that we sort of had a few of these venues already. And then one saw another and another. And so they sort of built their own industry. They noticed sort of the success that one farm was getting, and they said, well, we can do that next fall. We have sunflowers. We could do, people love to come see sunflowers or lilacs or anything like that. So there was a little bit of prior art for this. And it forced some or hastened some development on our end. So before, we've been really focused on just general admission, just come one, come all, anytime you want. But these needed to be really closely scheduled. So only 50 people in the farm in this sort of 10-minute increment or 15-minute increment. And so that was a bunch of, so we sort of raced. We said, okay, we've got some business here. Great, jump on it as hard as you can. And so we sort of built all these timing features into the platform to support those events. So yeah, pumpkin patches are a big one this time of year. They're great. As we wait for festivals to come back, we still love our pumpkin patches. And yeah, all these agricultural events, yeah, I think they sort of spread across Canada, and it's been neat to see.
Well, that's cool, and you had to do all those adjustments based on the regulations and whatnot. So good on you. Clive, your Pixton, it's representing use with students, generally maybe younger students. But are you finding older students, any college, university use cases, or things in enterprise, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely. We purposely designed Pixton so it doesn't look particularly juvenile, because there are perfectly valid use cases, like you said, in post-secondary education or even in sort of a business context. In the business sort of context, it's a very different, I think they're different. The market requires a bit of a different product, and we've just chosen to focus on the education market. But yeah, it's very versatile, and I mean we aspire to sort of give comics a higher status among media of self-expression, right next to like blogs and video. Okay,
thanks. So this is more broadly as well. So in tech or just in business, we have the HR challenges, but we also have salaries and wages, and has anybody noticed big ups or downs there, or have things returned, or is the competition for jobs just so high that you're having to pay above average wages from what you've been doing before? Any comments on that broadly?
We expect, as we hire again, that wages are up. It's going to be a much harder struggle to come up with the wages that software engineers are looking for these days, and especially with all these opportunities for working remotely. Lots of people have sort of, yeah, they've snapped up opportunities, so we expect the competition to be fairly fierce. Yeah,
I imagine. Josi, so you're representing an application that is maturing within I'm assuming a sector of aviation. You referred to bigger companies with teams of people doing similar things, but when we think of these larger airlines and whatnot, I mean that's got to be all digitized, isn't it?
Unfortunately, no. Even up to WestJet. Few years ago, I actually had the benefit of sitting pretty much right up front there, where the airplane had a snag, as we called it, and it was a defect, and it was fairly simple to fix. Their mechanic came up and did a bit of this and a bit of that, and within about 2 minutes, he had it all fixed up. So he proceeded to take the pilot's paper documents away and spent 45 minutes filling out paperwork in his office, and came back, and then the airplane was ready to go. So it took him literally 3 times as long to fill out the paperwork as it would to fix the airplane. So no, the majority of the systems now they remain undigitized, even to the very large Canadian operators anyway. There might be others out there that are tremendously huge that have something in place, but nothing like Propeller One to my knowledge.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm not sure we wanted to know that, but yeah, not to take away from the process of it, but maturing that is fantastic, and good for you for doing that. So again, more broadly, do any of you see bigger changes coming as we move into more recovery, or are there other things that you're concerned about for your businesses, or again, more broadly?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think aviation is going to see quite a boom, especially come the next summer. We have a lot of pent-up demand. So I think specifically the operators that we're focusing on, they're going to become very busy, and I don't think they're going to know what to do. It's changed our lives forever, the pandemic. So people are going to, not want to work in a small office with 15 other people. So I think the program offers people to work from home or more remotely, or simply just have more space to do their jobs.
For me, there was a time when I aspired to build, grow the sort of personnel in our business physically, like be able to be physically in the same place. And now I'm aspiring to grow our team remotely, and I'm fine with that. And also to the point about hiring, I wasn't hiring people during the pandemic, but I am hiring developers now. And I'm basically, I've been very upfront, and I've said that I'm willing to pay people what they're worth and not overwork them. And I've been getting a very good response. So, I mean, obviously everyone isn't in that position, but that's been working really well.
We 100% see pent-up demand. We can see it. We sort of have the queue of the events that are loading up tickets right now, and it's really heartening to see old events come back with sort of their full roster, and then tons of new events as well. So our sales pipeline has gone pretty crazy in the past month, and everyone's just about to push play on things, and so we anticipate, like sort of Josi said, a pretty fast and quick recovery in this sector. We don't know if there's going to be quantity caps brought back or anything like that. Our feeling, though, is that these events are sort of all going ahead in fairly similar stages to what they were pre-pandemic. So yeah, we expect a pretty robust and pretty immediate recovery, with lots of stuff going on sale in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so thanks for that. So I think it was Josi, but that mentioned this, but I think we would all agree. Any business, any individual within any business, we see consumer behavior changes. That there's some will just get back to normal, but there's quite a few of those changes that will become the new normal. And your products are representing parts and pieces of that. And Clive, like you mentioned, different decisions from owners, operators, managers, really looking for these hybrid spaces between filling your office, working with people more remotely, and that could be down the street in the community next door, could be across the country, obviously around the world, but that really creates a unique profile of your businesses and how you're recovering and thriving and developing with all of this coming at us. So we're coming up to time here. If anyone has more questions, please just give me. I got time for about 2 more. but just kind of moving into a bit of a wind down. Okay, I'll just open it up to the panelists here with any parting notes, and we'll pass it back to the host, and with thanks to Vaya and the Island Good packages that are supporting this opportunity. So anything from any of you presenters?
I'll just give a weird sort of general shout out to technology, given that this is a tech panel. So we're mostly a service business, and we spend a lot of time talking on the phone with people and being at the gate with people. But if we hadn't had such a technological foundation, this whole thing would have been a doozy, even more than it was. And so we've built contact tracing tools and small group tools and vaccine passport scanners and all these different things that have enabled us to sort of be nimble during this time in a way that I can't imagine being without all this technology at our disposal. And going forward, all those tools stick around. And so the ability to swap tickets last minute because a venue was closed down or somebody got sick or all these sort of things, they're all enabled by technology. And then just the fact of us living here in this beautiful little valley midway up this beautiful little island, but with customers all across the country, is another sort of technological marvel. So yeah, it's kind of a strange thought, but we've benefited fully from this technological revolution, and all this equipment. Just the fact that people are willing to buy tickets on the internet. I mean, when we started, that wasn't a thing. People wouldn't sign up with us because they were worried that people couldn't figure it out. People were afraid to put their credit cards into their phones or onto their computers. So it's quite a neat world that we live in, and grateful that technological innovation has let us stay nimble during this time.
Anyone else from the Josi?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to actually put a thank you out for having me as a presenter here. I do appreciate it. And Alex, Michael, and Clive, you all have some very wonderful things to offer there. And it was nice to learn about everything that you have going on. And a thank you to Graham.
Yeah, I second that.
All right. Well, Alex, you covered a lot of broad things as well in that closing. So tomorrow morning, the donut economic presentation is going to kick off. I believe 8:30. It was put into the chat there. So for those that are coming back for the rest of the conference, it's just getting started. Welcome, and we hope to see you through the platform here. Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully the windstorms have passed. So take care, everybody.